For the state, got David Crawford here, director with AIANC. And John, you want to step into the light here?
Step into the light.
John Paquin is the president of the board this year for AIANC. And we appreciate you taking the time this morning to give us the state of the state.
Happy to do it.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Bailey.
Mhm.
All right, everybody in person, thank you for being here. Everybody online, thank you for being here. Just some housekeeping issues because this is hybrid. We don't exactly know how the audio is working. And so if you are having any issues with hearing us, because we're going to move a little bit around the room here, just raise your hand or put a note in the chat. Laurent back here is monitoring that for us. So we don't have all the high-tech equipment here today. I'm just working off my computer. So let us know if it's not working, okay? I'm going to try to start the presentation, so bear with me. Share screen, that'll do it. Okay, gotta get rid of this, right? Yeah, what that's about. Bless you. And then I'm going to put it into presenter view. And hope, yep. Okay. Laurent, do you have the welcome slide on your screen? Yeah. Okay. Excellent. All right, I think we're good to go. Thank you everyone for being here. This is the third that we've done, third one we've done for the sections this year. So I really appreciate the opportunity from the Triangle to go ahead and give us this time to bring you up to date on what's going on with AI in North Carolina and what's happening in the profession. This is your executive committee for AI in North Carolina. See, we try to have representation from all over the state. Sometimes it's a little hard to get members from some of the smaller sections, but we generally have a really good core group from the two major sections in the state, obviously the Triangle and Charlotte. As was introduced already, John Paquin is with us today, and we're going to be handing off. Actually, Megan Bowles is with us today as well. She's going to do a little piece of the program for us as well as we get into this. So I'm going to turn it over to John, and he's going to do the first part on strategic plan.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. John Paquin, president of AI North Carolina. Again, thank you for being here and for the State of the State address. First thing I want to talk about was the 2022-2025 strategic plan. We have two current focuses between equity and climate, again, aligning with national goals. And again, we're trying to prioritize those particular things going forward through the year, primarily in terms of for equity, diversity, inclusion, and ecological imperatives. And we're also reinstating the AI North Carolina Foundation this year. Again, its goal is to promote architecture across the state through public awareness, primarily through financial scholarships, as well as the Activate program as well, going into this program. Advancing. The QR code for the strategic plan is here. Again, build, challenge, and amplify is the main goals of the strategic plan. And the QR code is there. And a number of we believes. Again, this is where we start to talk about the unique role and we believe architects have the unique role in shaping the future of North Carolina, active engagement. Again, we're really imperative about the most effective the profession must be for inclusivity, particularly for historically marginalized and underrepresented communities. And hopefully, again, the climate action is imperative as well. And primarily, we believe the thriving North Carolina relies on our membership being present and investing in expertise and perspective to promote community well-being. And again, build, challenge, and amplify is one of our main goals. Build a place of belonging for all architects in North Carolina. Challenge the impact that our industry has in our communities and amplifying the voice amplifying the value of architects bring to their communities by serving as the voice for our members in North Carolina. I will turn it over to Dave.
Okay. All right, so this is my economic update that I do every year with you guys. Normally I just have one set of slides and I kind of go through it with all the sections, but this has changed in the last couple of days. And I want to show you a little bit about that. We had been kind of on a level playing field for a while. Things had dipped down in the fall of last year. First of all, how many of you, well, in the room, I know I've got more online, are aware of the Architectural Billing Index from National AIA by show of hands? Okay, good. A couple of you. But the majority do not. So I need to make sure that I plug that for the organization because the AIA spends a lot of time, a lot of resources on economic data, not just for you all and members of the organization, but for the general public as well, because the ABI is used on all the major prognostication websites and publications and newspapers around the country. We're sort of the canary in the coal mine when it comes to the design and construction industry. The AGC utilizes our ABI a lot because they are forecasting what's coming down the pike for their members. One of the things we found towards the end of last year is a little bit of a dip. And of course, this sort of tracks with the national pundits talking about a recession that has not really materialized yet. However, what's going on, I'm going to talk a lot more about this a little bit later on, is the construction industry is sort of propping up the economy here. And it really had been in the last quarter of last year. We're starting to see a little bit of diminishment in the billings index right now, which kind of tracks with what I've been hearing from some of our firms that do a lot of work in the developer sector. There seems to be a little bit of a pulling back, a little bit less in terms of capital. Of course, as interest rates are going up, that's going to affect what happens in that market. And so I think what we're starting to see now on the billing side of things is that effect on the economy. Now, does that mean we're actually going into a recession? I'm not an economist, so don't take my word for this, but I've been listening to a lot of the economists from the design and construction community over the last year. They're actually projecting not a recession, but what they're calling a slow session now. And that's just maybe a cooling off a little bit, because in the design and construction industry, we've seen a massive influx of money from the government. Now, especially here in North Carolina, over the last 2 years, we've seen the state put $6.2 billion worth of construction into the economy. It hasn't been injected all at once, obviously, because we can't handle that kind of volume in this state, but it's projected to be over the next 6 years. And so there's sort of this steady stream of government money. That doesn't even include any of the federal funds that are coming from the federal programs that were passed last year, the Inflation Reduction Act, and some of the stimulus acts that were passed as a result of the pandemic. So there's equally as much money coming from the feds as the state has put into design and construction. So what we think is happening is that's what's propping up the economy right now. Obviously, in this industry, you guys are the beneficiaries of that and should be, we think, for the next couple of years. But as you see that the Architectural Billing Index, you can see how we're starting to look at this downward cycle starting the summer of last year. One of the things that's really interesting, though, and I'm trying to pay close attention to because this is new, is regionally what's going on. Because for the last couple of years, the South has been one of the strongest economic sectors in the country. outperforming the East and the Midwest, sometimes the West. But what we're starting to see is a slowdown here as well. Again, my take on that, this is not verified from The Economist, is that's part of the private sector maybe slowing down a little bit. I think, if I had more people in the room, I would normally ask this question and try to do some feedback, especially from folks that have clientele in the private sector. I kind of know what's going on in the public sector because that's where I do most of my work for you all. And I know that there's a lot of money out there and a lot of projects out there. But I'm not as sure about the private sector. Have heard things are slowing down a little bit in the developer community. So the one thing I want to also point out, and this sort of tracks with what I've been saying about the money being spent on the institutional side of things, government, is right here. Where's the strong sector? Well, of the three that they track for AIA, the institutional sector is still the strongest. And I suspect over the next few months, you're going to see commercial, industrial probably continue to go down a little bit. And residential, which is really interesting, with the interest rates, the prediction has to be that that's going to go down. The pressure that the feds are trying to put on the economy right now affects that directly. And so I would suspect we're going to see more of that as the interest rates continue to go up. But what's the consensus forecast amongst all the prognosticators out there? Well, this year looks pretty good. You can see they're looking at 5.8% increase in construction. And then next year, they're sort of thinking, okay, we'll level off. It'll be probably 1% or below. They simply don't know. It's just a guess at this point. But they are pretty sure that for 2023, things are still looking pretty good. All right, so that's where we stand on economic forecasts. I would say, and I can't see you guys online right now, but if you have any questions, I would ask you to raise your hand. Laurent can monitor that, or go ahead and put a question in the chat. And then Laurent, if you would just want to wave and get my attention, I'm really happy to answer any questions about any of these things as we go through right now. Megan, I think that we're up for your section. So Megan Bowles, our president-elect.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Just going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm really excited to remind you all about the MOU that we have with NC-NOMA. We signed that in 2021. And the primary goal of that is to partner as organizations to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion within our profession and throughout our community. I'm going to have Dave speak about one additional aspect that we are looking at as part of our strategic plan and see some movement this year.
Yeah, we hope so. So one of the goals in the strategic plan is to actually get another architecture school in North Carolina. Layered on top of that, we all know that the numbers for minority participation in this profession are just plain horrible. There's no other way to describe it. Our numbers for women architects have been going up the last 10 years, and we've been making progress there. We're still not where we need to be, but it's even far worse for the African-American community. Less than 2% of licensed architects are African-American. That needs to be addressed, and it needs to be holistic within this organization, within the profession itself. So that needs to start at the root level, and that goes for education. And so one of the things that we've identified here is we know A&T has an architectural engineering program. We know that in the past that there have been discussions with that institution to open an architecture program there. it is a really difficult haul to make that happen in a state university. And so we're going to have to attack this from a number of fronts. One being directly with that campus, the other being on the legislative front. And so that's partly where I come in on that. We've started discussions over in the legislature, but we need to continue those discussions this year. And that's a pretty big goal for us within our strategic plan.
Thanks, Dave. That's great. So building off of that, as we build on the education and building that pipeline, what is the role that firms play in increasing diversity in the profession? And it really starts with equitable practice and building a place where people feel included and where they belong. And so what we've started this year with NC NOMA is a challenge to firms to take and looking at increasing equity and inclusion in your firm. So we were calling this the Equity and Inclusion Challenge. This is something that you can take the pledge today, and we run this throughout the year. So every month we put forth a challenge to firms to look at what your current practices are. And what we're asking is not that you hit perfection this year or that you increase your numbers by a certain amount, but what we're looking for is for you to take your next step. So we recognize that everyone is at a different point in their journey. And so we're not asking you to compare yourself to the next firm or the next architect, but we're asking you to look at what you're doing today and how can you do one thing better. And so what we're doing each month through social media is we are putting out a challenge focused on different areas of firm management and practice. We've looked at compensation, we're looking at work assignments, we're looking at hiring processes, and we're giving you some specific suggestions for things that you can do. We're also providing you to resources that you can use with your teams to improve equity and inclusion in your firms. This is all going to lead up to an award that we're introducing. This will be a new chapter award by AIA North Carolina. So this will be an Equity and Inclusion Award, and this will take place this October. It will open up towards the end of the summer, beginning of the fall. And we will make a call to firms to submit for this. And again, not looking for perfection, we're looking for progress. You can check out the website either at AIA North Carolina or NC NOMA to get additional information about both the challenge and the award.
Want to do this?
I am happy to do this. I'm a little less involved in this. Shauna Hammond, it has spearheaded this, and I do help with it a bit, but developing EP Friendly Firm Award 2 years ago. Many of you have probably seen this, so this will be our third year doing this. And what this is looking at is measuring and recognizing firms who have created an atmosphere in which emerging professionals can really thrive within their workplaces. This can be a large firm, a small firm, but really are you creating the environment in which your people can thrive and move forward with outstanding success. So you'll see the winner last year was Shawstack Design. So congratulations, and look forward to seeing who we'll have this year. Thank you all.
And we started this program 2 years ago, and there was minor participation. Last year there was much better participation, but we're looking to really even try to double participation in this program this year. So that's why we're highlighting it in this State of the State address. EP Award Support Program. This is something that was started a couple years ago as well, and it's been modeled after the Fellows Committee program that we have here in the state to shepherd our candidates for fellowship through the awards process. There are two major EP awards, both at the state level and at the national level, one for a young architect and one for an associate. And what they do is basically, mentor folks through the process, what it takes to put together a really good presentation to the national committee that selects the awards. And they go through pinup processes as well, which is the same thing that we do for the fellows process, which has been fairly successful over the years. The first year that this was implemented, we were quite successful with 3 candidates that were awarded at the national level. So we're continuing that this year. I think last week was the first meeting of this group, and they'll continue on until September of this year. I want to highlight this. How many of you in the room, and I wish I could see you all online, ask you to raise your hands, know what the framework for design excellence is? Yeah, this is part of the problem we have. This is a major initiative for the AIA and for the profession as a whole. And it's to try to get people to think about how they're designing for the environment, for the climate. And we haven't done a great job nationally or in the state here of promoting this. And so one of the things that we started to do 2 years ago is include the framework into our design awards program. In other words, as you're submitting for design awards, you've got to tell us how many of the 10 items in the framework you guys have taken into account with your design of the submission that you're putting in for our awards program. We're slowly introducing it. We know that there are dozens and dozens of components around the country that are doing this right now. And we're all in concert on this. But the problem is our general membership doesn't really know. Hold on a second, I got to get rid of this. Doesn't really know what the framework is. So what we're doing through our coach is rolling out seminars on what this is. They did 2 last year, and hopefully they'll do 8 this year, which will include all 10 of the items in the framework. One of the problems that we have with the framework, I think, is, you know, the profession came up with this, right? It's a way that you're supposed to practice holistically. But the problem is we didn't introduce it, I think, at the right level. It needs to be introduced in schools. And this is where you've got to make sure that the next generation coming up understands this is a holistic way to practice. This is the way the profession has said. We need to do this for the climate. And so I think that's our biggest challenge. You know, it's a challenge to introduce this in the design awards area, but we've got to get the profession at a point where it's kind of like, you know, the sustainability issue that you all, you know, have known about for 20 years. And a lot of you, sitting in this room probably have gone through school in the last 20 years, and you were taught those aspects of sustainability in school. That's what needs to happen here. And I'm hopeful that the AIA at the national level and through our local and state components will be working with the colleges and the universities to make sure that this framework becomes part of it's rote for everybody who practices. And speaking of climate, I want to highlight another thing that we are taking the lead on here in North Carolina for the rest of the country, quite frankly. And it's something that Richard Alsup, who is on our board, he's secretary this year, but he's been on our board for the last 6 years, I believe, doing climate related stuff, realized that the largest percentage of carbon, embodied carbon, that is put into the construction process really resides in a couple of elements you all use, concrete and steel. And we started last year with the concrete industry because we needed to understand where they were in terms of reducing their carbon footprint. And I'm here to tell you, we were shocked and amazed at how much further along they are than you all know about. And what we found out is they're not party to the level of practice that you guys employ when you do your design and your specifications. And that's part of the problem, because they have so many solutions that we as a profession need to implement, but they have no way of essentially talking to us because of they're down here on the chain, right? So you guys do your design, your specs, you ask your engineers, hey, do all the calculations for me on the steel and the concrete. They send it to you. How often do you look at it? How often do you even know what's in there? The contractors get it. They, pull a spec off the shelf and that's it. And the concrete providers down here don't have any way to influence the decision-making up here. And that's what we found was the biggest problem in this chain. So we're trying to change that because they can save so much embodied carbon already that you guys don't know about, but you just need to know about it. You need to learn from them how we change the specification process. We did a summit, very first summit ever in the AIA with the concrete industries. It was in this room. We had 45 people from around the country come here and say, thank you so much for putting this together, because we've been wanting to get to you all. And we're like, okay, we didn't know that. The one thing we walked away with, every single person in the chain of concrete said, y'all need to start using performance specifications with concrete. It would change the dynamic immediately if you started using performance specifications. They have dozens and dozens and dozens of environmental product declarations that can be used that you all don't even know about. So we're trying to change the narrative on that and change the way we practice with that industry, as well as steel. We started with steel this year as well. It's amazing to me when you start listening to the steel producers of how they have changed their processes and are continuing to change their processes to get rid of embodied carbon. The numbers would just blow your mind if you all knew and could work with them as well on specifying certain types of steel. So anyways, like I said, we're running point on that for the nation. Nobody else in the country is doing that. And we really hope to make an impact nationally on this. All right, just in terms of where we stand with the organization here, we are at 4 1/4 staff at this point. We hired a new events coordinator last year, Marinelle Gerke, who was our part-time events coordinator for 29 years, retired at the end of last year or end of 21. We brought in Amy Smogi, who has been just spectacular for us. She's now full-time with us. She has taken over not only events, but continuing education as well. So you'll see her on a lot of the seminars that we do outside of OWLS. Maggie has continued with our OWLS program here. Our COO is Joel Commonville. Many of you know him here. And then we have a vacant position right now, which will remain vacant probably through the middle of the year. And hopefully middle to end of this year, it's a part-time position to help with our advocacy here in North Carolina, especially on the regulatory side and mainly on the codes. One of the things that we realize and the board realizes is, we've not done a great job in monitoring and liaisoning with the Code Council. And so we need, that's sort of one of the areas of weakness for us that we need to build up. In terms of finances and membership, we are finally back to our 2008 numbers where we were at 2,400 members. The recession was long and deep for us. You can see that in this graph here. But finally, we've come out of it and we're at 2,500 members right now. Still showing growth for this year, so that's great. We hope that continues over the next couple of years. And then our finances, been saying this for a long time, but it's finally happening. when we built this building, you know, we had some cash reserves here of over $300,000. And then obviously we had to spend a lot of it to upfit and get into this building. And so you can see our reserves dip. But over the last few years, we've been able to put a lot of money aside, primarily because as this building ages, we've got some maintenance issues to deal with. I'll show you in just a second. These are just our general graphs, but I do want to highlight this, try to let everybody know where our budget comes from. And the vast majority for AI in North Carolina are those dues. It's, you know, a little over 70% of our operating budget is from dues. That's, in my estimation, too high for an organization like ours. We want to get that down to about 50%. So what does that mean? Well, it means we got to raise more money in all these other areas here. So we've got lots of programs going on to do that, including the Aspire conference, which is, you know, a good moneymaker for us and the other states that are involved, as well as some of the continuing education and a couple of other programs. And one I'm going to touch on in just a second, which has a lot of potential. These are expenses, obviously. You can see staff is obviously the number one for any organization. And then facilities right after that. Facilities, you know, generally for an association like ours isn't as high as 32%, but they also generally don't have a Center for Architecture mortgage like we have now. A lot of that is paid for by rents that we have in the building too. So we've had the third floor lease the entire 12 years that we've been in this building. We continue to have a tenant on the third floor that we're renegotiating another 5-year lease with. So knock on wood, everything's good there. And then as far as continuing education is concerned, I want to highlight the online opportunities that we have for you all. It's through a website called Thinkific, but this is what it looks like when you hit it. So all of the programming we do at Aspire, plus all of the programs that we do here at AI in North Carolina, reside when we record them on this site for you. Now, as an architect, a licensed architect in North Carolina, you have access to all of this. And the reason for that is we have a deal that we've had for the last 3 years with the North Carolina Board of Architecture that because the Board of Architecture takes very seriously their mandate that you have to have continuing education every year. And so they work with us to make sure that anybody who is deficient in their continuing education can have access to programs and get it immediately. That's what this site is for as well. So if you find yourself ever in a position where you're being audited by the Board of Architecture and you need some quick continuing education, give us a call, give Amy a call, give me a call. We'll set you up with a password to get into that site. You can take care of all your continuing education needs on our site. I am thrilled to tell you about something we've tried to accomplish for the last 12 years, and now it's finally accomplished. We have now put a full array of solar panels on this building. If those of you in the building here drove up today and saw those, I hope you did. You can see them from just a little bit up the street. We've been trying to do this for a long time. We tried to do it when we built the building, obviously. Ran out of money, ran out of cash. And at that time, the incentives as well as the price for PVs was at the point where we just couldn't make the economics work for them. Now, cost of it has come down and the incentives are there. So there's a $150,000 installed cost for a 75 kilowatt system. And there is a $56,000 rebate from Duke for commercial. Residential is going to be a little bit different. There's a lot more competition in the residential market if you've tried to get involved with that. We are very fortunate in that we're in the nonprofit space, and the slots for those incentives from Duke aren't really taken up much in the nonprofit space. So we were able to sort of walk through that door pretty easily. In the commercial space, there's more competition, but I'm here to recommend that if you're working on commercial projects, call Duke, try to find out what the incentives are. What we have done here is swapped our monthly Duke bill for essentially a 15-year loan on these panels. I went to our bank. I said, on average, we're spending $770 a month on power. What can you do for me? So they worked out a deal, said, we'll give you a 15-year loan. Great, for $100,000, we get the $56,000 back from Duke. We're all good. So we're gonna celebrate this on April 19th with a celebration, which will be after our legislative day here. So make your plans now, please, everyone, to come to legislative day on April 19th, and then hang around from 4 to 6, where we're going to have a legislative reception and also the celebration. So part of what has gone on, and one of the reasons why I believe we've been able to take advantage of this, and that the reason Duke has these incentives is 2 years ago, the state passed a new law which requires the utilities in the state, which basically is just Duke, to get to renewable portfolio of zero carbon by 2050, I think it is. So they're having to put into place these new programs, these new incentives, and we've been the beneficiary of that. We want to let the legislature know that that's the case, and some of their work contributed to having us go net positive. So we are not just net zero, we are going to be net positive. I am using about 220 kilowatts on average a day here. We're producing close to 280 kilowatts a day with this system. What's happened with the building over the last 12 years? Like I said, there's just like your house, after 10 years, shit starts to break. It's just the way it is. And it's no different with a commercial building. We've had some things, you guys are sitting here, and a couple of you said, hey, you got new carpet in here? Yes, we did get new carpet because the old stuff was just gross. And we were able to get a manufacturer that came in here and said, you guys have some acoustic problems in this room. Yeah, we do. It's pretty bad. We haven't been able to get acoustic panels up on the ceiling yet. That's the next thing we're working on. But in order to help with the acoustical problem we have here, these tiles that are here on the floor are supposed to be acoustically rated. So it's a little bit better than it was. The other thing, and I have to tell you this in terms of kind of how my legislative mind works. We had over here, you can see that we dug up the front of the building a few months back because we were having a problem with one of the lines, waste lines that went from our HVAC units in the basement and carried condensate out to the sewer line. And they were backing up, and we couldn't figure out what was the case. So we had a plumber out here for about 2 weeks trying to figure it out. They put cameras down the line and everything. And they finally said, we got to dig this thing up at the point where we think the junction is with the sewer line. They dug it up and they found that the contractor just didn't tie into the sewer line. And so we had a condensate line that was just sending condensate from the HVAC units for over 10 years into the dirt out front. And it just created like this concrete plug at the end of the line. And that's why everything was backing up. And I thought to myself, okay, this sounds like, we need to go after that subcontractor. And then it hit me, and I called an attorney because I knew what the answer was going to be, but I just had to call the attorney. And I said, all right, what's the statute of repose? They said 6 years, just like the architects. I said, so I can't do anything right now. Can't do anything. It was funny to me because I have worked for you all for a very long time in maintaining that 6-year statute of repose for you. And now I'm at the point where, no, I need to go see somebody, but no, couldn't do that. It wasn't too bad. It was only a few $1,000s. And a lot of you can tell also that we've re-landscaped the building here. That was about a year's process, and we finally have gotten it back to kind of its initial state, but we needed to change some of the plantings out here. That was a big expense. But like I said, putting money aside for that over the years. On to Activate, and I'm going to turn it over to John for that.
Okay. So again, the Activate program has been in place for several years now, and I've been honored to be involved with it over the past several years, and continue to be inspired by all the activities that we do. For those not familiar, we take $40,000 in member dues and reallocate it back to this program. So basically, it goes out to the communities, and it's a truly grassroots effort that's open to all North Carolina sections. Anyone can apply for an Activate grant. To date, we've given away over $240,000 to over 100 programs, and literally hundreds and thousands of people have been positively impacted by these programs. Again, anyone can generate an idea, it goes up to the section leadership, and it goes up to the program. So again, it really truly is a grassroots movement, and it's one of the largest things we do as AIA North Carolina to really increase public awareness, because it really truly is a grassroots movement throughout all the sections. To date, as of a couple of weeks ago, we've now awarded the next round of Activate grants for 2023. So what you see on the screen is all the awards and all the events to be happening this year. Again, 20 some odd programs, probably well over 1,000 people are going to be positively impacted. And again, 5 programs for Triangle were awarded through this year. And again, this particular slide and next slide just shows the diversity of these programs across the state, between the amount of people impacted, between children through adults, through a number of different programs. And it's just a huge benefit for North Carolina and for the people in our communities. I'll turn it back over to Dave.
Okay, so I actually added this slide this morning because it's something relatively recent that I've just started to work on. There aren't a whole lot of people around in this organization anymore that knows about association health plans, mainly because they went away for the AIA back in the very late 1990s and the early 2000s. I do remember them because I was around then. And what I remember when they went away is it was a huge benefit that was lost by our firms, and also a huge budget item that was lost by AIA. I happened to be working in California at the time, and we had a very large association health plan out there. And when that went away, it was kind of devastating for a lot of firms. When I got here in 2001, the same thing happened. So as everybody knows, the insurance marketplace has been so volatile for the last 20, 30 years. We were not immune to that. And so what happened when the association health plans went away, it sort of threw everybody into the open market. And I know if there are firm owners out there, I know I've got some in the room here, you know what you're spending on health insurance for your employees, and it is a massive amount of money. I have to deal with it for my staff here, and I know how the increases have affected our budgets, as well as what we can pay employees as well over the years, because so much more has been going into our health insurance. What's been happening in the marketplace over the last 10 years or so is there's been a push to somehow get association health plans back into the states. And I've been working with the Association of Associations, which is my professional organization, to try to make that happen here in North Carolina, and then tracking it at the national level as well. To spare you a lot of details, there have been laws passed at the state level and laws passed at the federal level to allow associations once again to put together association health plans. And it's under something called a MIWA, which is a multiple employer welfare arrangement. It's a little different than what they were in the past. Doesn't matter to you guys. But what matters to you is whether or not we can do it here in North Carolina. And just recently, the Department of Labor federally has sent guidelines down to the states, which now opens the marketplace again for associations to do this. There is only one association right now in North Carolina that is looking at this and is fully underway to get one in for their organization. It's the Home Builders of North Carolina. I've had discussions with them about what they're doing. I am meeting with the consultants that they've hired to do this. And right now, I am riding in their wake. They're plowing through all the regulatory environment and the legal aspects of how you put this together. But if and when they are successful, it looks like they will be, it'll open the door for a lot of other organizations, including ours. And what that means for our membership, especially for the firm owners out there, is a much more competitive health insurance market for you all. We want to be able to offer you the lowest, best health insurance for your employees. This is a way to do it, which is a huge benefit that we can offer as an organization for our members across the state. And also there is a financial benefit for our organization as well. And I will tell you, when I first got here in 2001, we were making close to $100,000 a year off this plan, and our firms were paying far less in health insurance and very happy with their health insurance at the time. So we want to get back to that, and we're working actively on that. Okay, on to the legislative stuff that's going on. This is where I spend a good portion of my time for you all. And I want to highlight a couple of things that have happened over the last couple of years. I mentioned it earlier. Oh, the last biennium saw the state pass close to $6 billion. Actually, it's over $6 billion in capital construction. This was all cash. And why? You know, normally those of you who've been, you know, doing architecture for a long time in the state, and you're in the public sector, that's your marketplace. You know that those kind of numbers really only came when the state passed bonds. The leadership in the General Assembly today is not at all interested in passing bonds anymore. They do not want to incur debt. So what happened that allowed them to pull $6 billion out of thin air? Well, it really wasn't thin air. So what happened back in 2017 was Representative Dean Arp, who's out of Union County, and he's a structural engineer, came to us, the building design and construction. He said, I have an idea, and I think I can get leadership in the General Assembly to go along with me on this. He said, I want to put 4% of the revenues collected in the state every year into a new fund called the State Construction Infrastructure Fund, or the SCIF. In that way, we will be able to perpetually fund design and construction in this state without having to incur debt on bonds. And we said, sounds good to us, good luck. Because that really is a pretty tough sell. He got it done. And the SCIF was created in 2018, and then it started to be funded in 2019. So what we're seeing now is every year there's $1 billion to $2 billion worth of money that just goes straight into this construction fund. And it is perpetual, unless the legislature decides they want to change that, which they can do. And that's the peril in using cash for design and construction projects. However, when times are good, as they have been for the last few years, that money continues to flow. So that's why we're starting to see a lot more money every year going into design and construction projects. So I want to give Dean his credit for that, because I don't think many people understand that there was a sea change in the way this state looked at design and construction. So as I said, lots and lots of capital construction going on, but we got a problem. We have enormous construction inflation right now. You all know this. Any projects you've been doing for the last 18 months, you've seen that inflation. It's over 30% in most cases. And you're having to deal with redesign or somehow getting more money. The state's in the same issue, right? They've got over 600 projects that were in the last biennium in that SCIF fund. And every single one of those projects is being affected by material price hikes as well as supply chain issues. State construction is having to deal with this, and the legislature is having to deal with it as well. It can't just be a matter of cutting program. The state's got to come up with more money. In March, they came out with the analyst office, finance office, came out with their projection for this year, $3.25 billion worth of surplus in the state. One of the things we need, I think we need $1 billion out of that for the inflation fund. Now, the legislature created a small fund last year called the Flex Fund to help with these construction overruns of $100 million. Half of that has been used already on just 4 projects. So think about the 600 other projects that are out there. $100 million is a drop in the bucket, I hate to say. I mean, that doesn't seem like a small amount of money to most of the legislators over there, and it's not. But when you look at it in the total, and all of the projects that are out there, there needs to be a much larger infusion of money into the Flex Fund. And I think it's close to $1 billion. So that's one of the things we're going to be talking about on April 19th for the legislative day. I think all of us in the industry, including architects, engineers, and contractors, because it's a construction coalition day. Number one priority is you guys got to deal with this and not just keep telling us to cut program and cut budget. Let's see. I want to address the interior designer registration law that passed a couple of years ago as well. Most of you out there know that we dealt with this for like 5 years, 6 years. We finally got it put to bed 2 years ago. The interior designers are now full participants on the registration board with architects. So it's no longer just the Board of Architecture, it's the Board of Architecture and registered interior designers. And so far, as far as I know, things have been working okay. We've heard maybe 1 or 2 gray area issues that building and inspection departments have run across, which the Board of Architecture and Registered Interior Designers is going to have to deal with. But the sky hasn't fallen, and so that's the good news. Now, what I do ask of everyone that's out there, anybody in the room, if you're having issues, if you come across, and this really occurs obviously on interior projects. So if you're doing restaurants or retail outfits or something like that, and you're encountering issues with an interior designer, registered interior designer, where you think they're practicing over and above what they should be pursuant to the law that was passed and the regulations that were put in place by the new board, give me a call. I want to talk about it. I want to know so that we can talk to the new board about that. The new Architect Recruitment Act, we tried to get passed last year. Essentially what this is a very simple bill. It's essentially taking a law that the engineers already have for their registration board and inserting it for the architects board. But what's important about this is that, as I mentioned earlier, when we started talking about another architecture school for North Carolina, we need to do everything in our power to reach out to underserved communities, to invite them into our profession. And the Board of Architecture has about $1 million plus in their reserves that they would actually like to help in this endeavor, right? And it's something that AIA has undertaken. It's one of our strategic goals. We would love to be able to tap into some of those funds. NOMA would like to be able to tap into some of those funds in order to do outreach to underserved communities. They need a law to make that happen. So we tried to get this passed last year. It got through the House without any opposition. It just didn't get taken up by the Senate, which happens all the time, the legislature over there. We're having this reintroduced this year. We're going to try to get this done this year. So that'll be another issue that we'll address for Legislative Day. And the other issue, and I wish I could see you all on my screen here, but those of you in the room, by show of hands, how many of you have had issues in a project where you've got an elevator on the project, you've completed the project, now you're having to go through final inspection, and the Department of Labor comes in and says, you didn't install this pursuant to code? Oh, yeah, okay. So what we have found out, and this has been going on for decades, apparently, but I didn't know about it until I started working with state construction, and now they're really having trouble with it, that the Department of Labor statutorily has oversight and responsibility for everything elevator. And that includes new buildings, renovations, what have you. And of course, DOI through, building code has responsibility for everything else in the building. Well, you guys are used to using the building code. That's, where you go. That's how you know how to put a building together. But the DOL has a completely different statute, which is in, it's contradictory, and it's not harmonized with the Department of Insurance and the Building Code Council. So this conflict is created by enabling statute that needs to be changed. And that's another issue that we're going to address on April 19th. I have spoken to both DOL and DOI. They're willing to sit down. We just need to figure out what's the standard that's going to be used and how can we make sure it gets into the building code so you all know about it. And that's one of the big issues we have. So new building code is being discussed by the Building Code Council right now. We have had a task force looking at these 5 building codes over the last 4 months. We testified at the Building Code Council last week, 2 weeks ago. And there's not a lot of issues that we found from our task force on most of these codes, except I'm going to highlight the energy code here. And it's not necessarily our biggest problem, although we do have one issue with it we would like to have changed. But it is the home builders issue right now, de jour, for sure. There was only one code that had any controversy at all in the last Building Code Council hearing, and it was the energy code. There were at least 45 individuals that came to testify against the energy code. And it was all having to do with residential construction. The home builders claim that the new energy code will add $20,000 to the cost of a new home, average home. That's their claim. The energy advocates and the ICC, who have worked on this new energy code, claim that it's about $4,500. So yeah, there's going to be some additional expense. It's just a matter of who do you believe, right? And so that puts us in a very interesting position, because we haven't taken a formal position on the application of the energy code on residential projects at this point. We have taken a position on the commercial side of things. We do want one small change as it relates to existing buildings, which could have a major impact on existing buildings. That's an aside issue. We're working with the Building Code Council on that. But this is a huge one, because what's going to happen here once the Building Code Council passes these 5 codes, and I do believe it will happen in June. That's the next science benchmark that they have to meet. Pass it in June, it then goes to regulatory review for the next 6 months. After it goes to regulatory review, the home builders will, and I guarantee they will, object to it at regulatory review, which then automatically will send it to the legislature for review and dismissal. So the legislature has ultimate purview over the rules in this state if people object during the rules review process. And we already know that they're going to do this. So it will occur in the 2024 session. So that gives us another year basically to analyze what the energy code really means to residential construction. Had discussions with our leadership. We're going to have some more discussions about this on whether we want to be sort of a neutral party in this discussion. I think it's a role that we can play, but we've got to be involved in analyzing the energy code as it relates to residential. So basically what I'm asking here is if anybody is in the residential space and they know the residential code and how the energy code applies to it, we're putting another task force together to look at this in particular. If you would like to be involved with that, please email me or give me a call. I don't care one way or another. And let me know if you'd like to be part of this. We started a list of folks that we know that do residential work in the state. But I think there is a real opportunity for us to weigh in here and maybe put ourselves in a position of a neutral authority that the legislature can rely on here. Okay. And that's pretty much what we've got going on. Where am I at? Oh, we're going to finish a little early, except for plugging Aspire, as we always do. We're now going to be in our 5th year of Aspire. And thank goodness we'll be back in person again in Asheville. Last year was a great time. It was really the best conference I think we've ever had with our friends from South Carolina and Georgia again. So mark your calendars for September 10th through the 12th. And that is pretty much it. And we are open for questions at this point, if you've been saving any. Laurent, did any come up? Actually, let me.
There was some skepticism on carbon. Was it carbon credits?
Okay.
So there was a back and forth on that. How effective is carbon capture really a proven strategy? It seems like this is technology that's mainly funded by the fossil fuel industry.
So okay, so the question's about carbon capture.
Right.
Okay, so one of the things, and you probably have been listening to some of Richard's programs about carbon reduction and carbon capture. There are really 2 aspects here that we're dealing with. It's embodied carbon versus captured carbon. One of the things that we need to really look at as a profession is embodied carbon. As you're working on your designs, knowing how these materials are manufactured, knowing how they're transported, knowing, just everything that goes into the embodied carbon equation and what you're putting into your building. So that's one aspect of it. The capture aspect is so very, very new, and there is lots of different technology out there that's being looked at. It's not necessarily, the biggest issue that AIA is attacking. It's really the embodied carbon right now that we're looking at. Now, I know Richard has talked a lot about the capture aspect of it, and I think it's legit to talk about that. But we're not quite there yet, because there are lots of other groups, organizations scientists that are looking into this, and they're going to have to lead the way before, you know, we as an organization start getting on board with a lot of capture technology.
Another question was about how to get in touch with the concrete research group.
Ah, okay. So actually, could you let me type in my email address, and I will, let me put it in the chat here. Email me, whoever asked that question. Email me what you're looking for. We do know of a group that ACI has started, American Concrete Institute. They've started an offshoot. It's a new organization called NEU, which is their research arm for concrete. And we'll put you in touch with those folks because we do have a relationship with them.
That's it for now.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. Yes, question.
So first of all, for your presentation, I think you had a lot of this. Maybe this question is for Megan too. I was intrigued by the level of focus on the emerging professionals and DEI initiatives. How are other firms best suited to sort of gather lessons learned from most of their good work? And then you just have to follow what other states, what status other states pursuing registered designer elevation that.
Okay, so two questions for you. I know you didn't hear that. The first is how firms can get involved with the DEI.
How do you gather best practices?
Gathering best practices from other firms in the state on their DEI practices. And then the second question is what are the other states that are looking at interior design registration? Okay. Let me take the second one first, then I'm going to let Megan speak after me. So in terms of the states that are looking at interior design registration, there are already a number of states that have interior design registration. We weren't the first ones. I think we were about maybe the 16th state that sort of fell, and every registration law is a little bit different. What was different about ours is the way that our Board of Architecture engaged the interior design organizations and came to agreements with them. That's how it happened. It wasn't with us. We didn't negotiate directly with them because after 5 years of us fighting it, they finally took another tact and went to the Board of Architecture. The Board of Architecture was just tired of dealing with it and said, yes, we'll deal with you. Of course, we were there the entire time. However, what we put in place were some pretty good guidelines and a fence around the practice of interior design. So much so that national AIA has changed their policy on interior design registration, kind of mirroring what we did here. And so ASID has gone out to the rest of the country that doesn't have interior design and said, you need to look at the North Carolina law. And so it is being used as a model in other states. Wisconsin's one, Oklahoma was another. I think Iowa is another, Ohio was another, Pennsylvania was another. So there's a bunch out there right now that are looking at it based on what we've done here. I'm gonna let Megan talk about the EDI issue.
So great question. How are we going to take what we're learning and share that? So I appreciate it because it's definitely something that is on our mind of how can we do this. What we've talked about doing is where we gather the most information is from the award submittal rather than the challenge itself, is trying to summarize that and even put out some testimonials of this worked really well at a firm in this location. I guess I have a question for you. What is the best way for us to communicate that to you? Is it posting it on a website? Is it video testimonial? What would be most helpful to you?
Yeah, good question. I was prepared.
No, put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think it would be emails or nothing else that sort of give updates, you know, hey,
Sure.
sort of you know, nothing too formal, but just kind of whether the DEI or professional or, you know, whatever you're doing, I think people are always looking for support. So I never formatted that.
Yeah.
And I know some challenges, we talk about, people heard on any issues or kind of everything. So I appreciate the challenge today.
Yeah.
So, just for the challenge.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. So the EP award we've had out for this will be our third year, and we've been talking about that of how do we get this back out to the public. So I appreciate that the desire is there and we're not just imagining that desire. So we will definitely continue to work on that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Any more that has come through? No? Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending today. And if you have any other questions for me, please, I've put my email address in there. Most of you here in the Triangle know where we're at. Stop by, say hi.
And also the session was recorded, so.
Was recorded, so I'm sure that you guys will be putting that up and it'll be available for anybody that's not here. Great. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.